Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hivemind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. We gotta talk about something very important and also something we've talked about before, the true election interference. It wasn't Russia, it wasn't a foreign nation, it wasn't an individual, it wasn't a public official. I mean, maybe to a certain extent some of those could be true, who knows? But one thing that we know is provable, one thing that we know is probably the biggest factor when it comes to election interference comes from big tech. Silicon Valley is probably the group with the most political influence, the group with the most political power in the entire world. They are currently shaping, through propaganda and through absolute, abject, irrefutable bias, they are molding the political minds of the uninformed. In my opinion, it's criminal. And probably the worst actor out there is Jack Dorsey and of course Twitter. And then second in the race would be Facebook and Google. And probably the most relevant story that you could think of recently is of course the Hunter Biden scandal that dropped about a month before the election, with the tech oligarchs in Silicon Valley scrambling to skew it as misinformation and to suppress it as much as possible. Well, that decision that they made may have some consequences, because Twitter is currently being sued for defamation by the New York Post source on Hunter Biden stories, aka the laptop repairman who gave the contents of the laptop to the New York Post. And so things are getting real serious. This could be the next Nick Sandmann case, and Twitter might take a massive hit. So I gotta update you guys on that story, and then we gotta talk about some other things. I wanna show you guys some brazen examples of the total bias that comes out of Twitter and of course some other companies. But before we get into any of it, please make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe, share the video as much as possible. We are still shadow banned by the YouTube algorithm, hidden from non-subscribed viewers. So make sure you guys support me as much as you can. I absolutely appreciate it. And of course, support other independent political commentators out there who work and strive on giving you guys the truth and parsing information that the media and the tech oligarchs skew. Now with that out of the way, let's roll the tape. Alright, so we got this from Variety.com. Twitter sued for defamation by New York Post source for Hunter Biden stories. A Delaware computer repair shop owner sued Twitter, alleging the social network defamed him by effectively labeling him a hacker after his business was cited as the source for info obtained from a laptop allegedly owned by Hunter Biden that served as the basis for several New York Post articles published in October. In the lawsuit, John Paul Mac Isaac said he was forced to shut down the Mac shop, his computer repair business in Wilmington, Delaware, after Twitter said the New York Post stories violated its quote hacked materials policy and initially disallowed users from sharing links to them. The Rupert Murdoch-owned paper claimed the material for its Hunter Biden exposés was supplied by Trump personal lawyer Rudy Giuliani, who allegedly obtained it from a MacBook Pro that had been abandoned in Mac Isaac's shop. Mac Isaac is demanding $500 million in punitive damages from Twitter, plus unspecified compensatory damages and lawyers' fees, as well as an order forcing Twitter to make a public retraction of false statements. The lawsuit was filed Monday, December 28th in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida. Plaintiff is not a hacker, and the information obtained from the computer does not constitute hacked materials because plaintiff lawfully gained access to the computer, the lawsuit says. As a result of Twitter's citing its quote hacked materials policy for blocking the Post articles, Mac Isaac's complaint says he is now widely considered a hacker and received negative online reviews and threats against his person and property. He claims he was ultimately forced to shutter the Mac shop. Twitter did not immediately respond for a request to this comment, and so initial predictions off of this, I think his statement is quite accurate. He's got a decent case here. I'm sure they filed the lawsuit in a district court that's most likely not just gonna instantly throw it out with a liberal biased judge. And my prediction would be that Twitter's gonna have to settle on this one. They're probably gonna send him a little settlement, meet in the middle, well, probably less than the middle, but I'd assume, just like Nick Sandmann, he's going to get a hefty settlement here. And good. These tech companies are the most evil force, the most anti-democratic force in modern history. Let's really put things into perspective here. They skewed the narrative so heavily that tens of millions of people voted for Joe Biden. If that's not argument enough, then I don't know what is. Every day you go on Twitter, they're promoting anti-Trump headlines non-stop and promoting anti-Trump political commentators onto your feed even though you're not following them. Anti-Trump this, anti-Trump that, and to the average folk who just don't pay attention, they eat it up like crazy. Twitter is the greatest source for misinformation on planet Earth. Just think about during the early days in the riots, I still have people who, when involved in a political debate with me, will say, oh, don't you know about the Boogaloo Boys during the riots? Don't you know that all the violence that was committed was from people that were out of state and they were right-wingers who were trying to make BLM look bad? Are you kidding me? A claim of misinformation that was passed around on Twitter with absolute impunity, which was swiftly debunked literally the next day as people went through the jail records and showing that most people that were arrested were from actually the same state in the same city where riots were occurring in the first place. And I really want to harp on that one point. One thing that Twitter does, which is absolutely unforgivable, absolutely despicable, and shows their clear clear political bias is just the way that they fact check. You might have seen this because I covered it just the other day very briefly, but let's get into it a little bit deeper. Here's Jon Ossoff, who's a US Senate candidate in Georgia for the runoffs, head to head with Kelly Loeffler. He tweeted this a mere 3 days ago. Good morning. Kelly Loeffler campaigned with a Klansman because of this picture, like I showed you guys, where allegedly a man who had been associated with the Klan literally just took a picture with Kelly Loeffler, and he says that she campaigned with him. Listen to what he said in this interview.
Any concern that the allegations of wrongdoing against Reverend Warnock could possibly be a drag on the Democratic ticket next week?
None whatsoever. Reverend Warnock addressed this issue a year ago, and here's the bottom line. Kelly Loeffler has been campaigning with a Klansman. Kelly Loeffler has been campaigning with a Klansman. And so she is stooping to these vicious personal attacks to distract from the fact that she's been campaigning with a former member of the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, we deserve better than that here in Georgia.
That, my friends, is absolute misinformation. That is an outright lie, it's slander, and it's misinformation affecting the outcome of an election. Twitter, however, of course, is putting all their money on guaranteeing a Democrat, quote, supermajority, with Democrats taking the Senate through the runoffs in Georgia. You might be just some guy with a couple thousand followers, and you tweet something about the election, and Twitter will label it disputed, or fact check it, say it's false information. A public figure, a US Senate candidate in one of the most consequential elections in recent American history, literally says Kelly Loeffler campaigned with the Klansman, and not a single Twitter fact check to be found. Absolutely despicable, and you know that it's despicable given the fact that literally CNN even fact checked the claim, fact checking Ossoff's, quote, false claim that Loeffler has been, quote, campaigning with a Klansman. CNN has more integrity than Twitter, but Twitter has more influence. That's the difference. When you watch CNN, you know they're giving you a biased spin. It's absolutely obvious. When you go on Twitter, if you're not paying attention, if you don't understand the dynamics behind the company and the way the algorithm works, the way the policy works, and the policy team is manipulating information behind the scenes, then, you know, you're susceptible to the MK Ultra style brainwashing that's going on right now. You're susceptible to the brainwash and the propaganda that's being pushed through the waves of Twitter. Speaking of the Georgia Senate runoffs, look at this from Jack Posobiec. He says, are you paying attention yet? Facebook shuts down fundraising pages for both Republican Senate runoff candidates in Georgia. It actually doesn't get any worse than this, folks. This is the world that we live in, with tech oligarchs who have business models of selling information, selling ads, and run some of the highest profit margins you can possibly imagine, have billions and billions of dollars in stackpiled cash, and they're using that money to get specific people elected and to affect the outcome of an election. We saw that with Facebook very recently, but it's not just the money. These tech companies have such unprecedented power in a historical context because not only does the money affect the actual outcome of the election by pumping hundreds of millions of dollars in, but they also control the waves of information. They also control the means of being able to spread information and what people are receiving. Your cell phone notifications, your Google searches, what you see on YouTube, what you see on Twitter, they control it. If you put yourself in a Republican bubble, you're going to get Republican news mixed in with, of course, a bunch of anti-Trump headlines. But the problem is, if you're not necessarily politically active or politically informed, but you do want to be a responsible adult and you want to vote, you get what you get. And what the average normal person is getting is straight up liberal propaganda. And it's not even liberal. That's a skewed definition. You're getting establishment Democrat, establishment Washington corporate propaganda shoved down your throat and molding your mind, and you don't even know it. You're just reading headlines, giving power to authority, seeing it comes from a, quote, reputable news outlet, CNN, the most trusted name in news, and you take it on face value. People don't even read in. They don't research what the elements of the actual story themselves. They don't look into the numbers. They read the headline and move on with their life. And generally with people that are uninformed or not necessarily strong critical thinkers or even really care about getting into politics, it usually leads to one perspective for all of these folk. Orange man bad, I guess I gotta vote for sleepy sniffer Joe Biden to save America. I mean, just saying it is comical to say the least, but it's also not. It's very sad. And these companies are actively destroying the middle class, American prosperity, American interest, and freedoms across the nation and across the Western world as a whole. Everything's getting worse. The middle class is dying, freedom of expression is dying, comedy is dying, the corporate elitists just get more and more powerful, China gets more and more powerful, and these tech companies are at the core of all of it. But that's what I got for you guys on this one. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe, share the video as much as possible. We are still shadow banned by the YouTube algorithm, hidden from non-subscribed viewers. Now, I gotta get back to work, of course. There's a whole lot of hypocrisy that must be exposed on a daily basis. You guys know it's a daily gig. So I'm gonna get to that. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.